Danie, my friend and top photographer who saved me many times. Where you from? Well, I actually know. I know you from Lumbers Bay, but just sort of a quick rundown. How was it growing up in Lumbers Bay?
So yeah, I was born in the Karoo in Calvinia, but as a baby we moved to Lambert's Bay where I grew up. So that's West Coast, Upper West Coast actually. So no, I mean I'm of the firm belief that if your children is primary school age now, having them grow up in a small town like that is an absolute privilege, you know. High school, it's probably more convenient for the kids to be in the city. But I think for me, in hindsight, that was phenomenal. I mean, it's next to the ocean. So after tennis practice, we'd go for a surf, or, after some extracurricular activity at school, you'd all go down to the harbor and you go fishing, or whatever the sort of fad was, all schools went through these fads. So then it's swimming here, then it's surfing there, then it's fishing. So it was amazing. We're very small. I mean, my final year in primary school, we were 8 kids in the class, and the whole school probably had about 80. So but we was in the fortunate position that we were all good friends. Yeah. So high school, I had to go to another school that was out of town, and that was a bit of a different experience. But primary school there was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, these days people pay huge, vast amount of money to have a school where 8 kids are in a class, So and they would love their kids to actually go swimming, and fishing and stuff like that. And I think being locked up in a COVID situation, even the kids, the teenagers would opt for that too,
For sure. And I think some teenagers would. I think it all depends, I suppose, on how, I wasn't in boarding school, so many of my friends were away. So that's maybe part of the reason it worked like that. But yeah, you're right. It was basically Montessori school,
Yeah, I remember those days. And yep, I grew up in a small town like you. But I always say, Chris Barnard also grew up in a small town. Jan Smuts grew up in a small town. Nelson Mandela grew up in a small town. Our small town people, great people, So
in my experience of the creative field, and especially if you, I'm not specifically talking about photography, but I've encountered many people. I mean, I've been to big decor exhibition things in Johannesburg where I was working, and there was a guy there from London, renowned guy from London, and he had sort of a very pan-European sounding name. When they said it was like Petrus Sonnekoos, something like that. And I was like, oh wow. I met the guy, and he had this, very familiar kind of, accent as well. And we started talking. I said, so where are you from? He's from Colesberg in the Northern Cape. And his name's actually Peter Sonnekoos. But, and he went to London. He basically made it big there. And I've encountered many people, like I said, especially the interior design, architecture, sort of I'd say the commercial creative fields. I've met a number of small town people, so there's maybe something being surrounded by space and openness, that does that.
But I think the other thing, Danie, and maybe that's a good point. I remember, there was no mall, there's nothing. Okay, when I was young, there wasn't even malls in the cities, but still, But I mean, that openness and the felt and just walking around. I remember you made your own toys. We built huts and swam in rivers, and I think it does something to you in that sort of creative, positive way, and your view of life. I don't know if there's somebody who wrote a PhD about that, but Yeah, in my amateur experience, I think it's a good place to grow up. Small towns.
For sure. Like I said, when you grow old, and I mean, the thing is with small towns, like in the city, you've got such a vast amount of people that you could choose to associate with. In a small town, you associate with who's there, and so so the character of the town will obviously influence your experience of it as well. But yeah, definitely. I think you're right. Time makes a huge difference. You know, I think children today they're also creative. You know, I look at my children; they definitely their more insular existence physically. I mean, they've got a much bigger view of the world out there, but their physical life is a lot more insular. So they're also creative in other ways. But I think ours, and again, this is just my perspective, I think ours is a little bit more ethereal, a little bit more pictorial, aesthetically driven, you know, as whereas theirs is very message driven and identity driven. You know, everything that they create needs to make some sort of a statement, you know. Whereas I think we were surrounded by what was pretty and inspired us, you know. So when I took pictures, I wanted to take pictures of things at the ocean. That was just the way it was, you know. So.
Which brings me to that question about how you became a photographer, because typically from a small town, you know, you grew up, you know, the important people are the banker, the doctor, the city engineer, who else was there, you know, that's probably about it, you know, maybe the minister. That's of really.
And the teachers, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you know, photography, Lumber's Bay, when you put your hand up and said, I want to be a photographer, you know, how did that go down?
It's weird. First off, how I got to it, I mean, it was one of these career counseling days, you know, that we had. It was a period that we had, I think, once every 2 weeks. But, I mean, there was no career counseling that took place. I was about 12. And they would just dish out these books and say, I think it was something along the lines of A to Z of career choices. You know, it's like a thick little book, and, you know, this is what this guy does with pictures, you know. And you'd have to sit and page through this thing. And I was paging through it, and I saw a guy with what I later learned was a large format camera. But I saw this weird-looking camera taking pictures of a bowl of fruit, and I thought, wow, I'm going to be a photographer. That's cool. And my mom used to love taking pictures with literally a Kodak Instamatic. It was proper branded Kodak Instamatic, you know. And she was always a creative person. I mean, and she eventually she had like a haberdashery, and she, you know, so there was definitely creativity in the house. But I just decided, okay, this is what I'm going to be. And I mean, I told my folks, and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, you know, sort of what, another fad, you know. But I immediately started saving for a camera. I was working at like a putt course or a mini golf course, you know, over holidays. I think I actually did a brief stint at the liquor store as well, carrying around boxes. That would be highly illegal now to have a 12-year-old work in a liquor store. And I bought a little camera. Eventually, when I was older, at 16, I upgraded to a SLR, which I still have back there. I can actually show it to you.
Sure, please do.
Yeah. So this is I'd say this is the camera where it sort of became real when I was about 16, and it has film in at the moment, and it still does work. So yeah. But so I mean, but when my parents realized I was serious about it, I mean, they were always supportive. I mean, naturally, my father, who sold insurance, you know, for a living and did retirement planning, he always said, please just do something that you like, you know, because he was kind of, from the era, he had to do what he needed to do, whether he liked it or not, you know. And he was always cautioning me. He says, you might never be a rich man if you go into the arts, you know, and he was right. They were supportive. I mean, right up to the end, just before I went to study photography, they said, you know, just make sure that this is what you want, you know, and, you know, is there a second choice? I mean, eventually on advice of a career counselor in high school, I applied for architecture at Michaelis as well. when architecture school was still part of Michaelis at UCT. But luckily I got accepted in the photography school, so I didn't have to go through the whole architecture. And I don't know if I would have had the stamina for a 6-year stint at university. So yeah.
Danie, what I love, two things about this story. One is your parents, your mom and dad, how they actually, and again, I know your dad, as you said, sold insurance, sort of the typical Sanlam guy, and how he supported and how he said, you need to do what you love, and how he was honest. You might not be a millionaire, but and it's great, and how both of them supported you. But also the other thing I like is how they encourage you and to sort of go for it. You got work, you saved money, you bought the first camera. A lot of people sort of nowadays, they want to do a career, they Google a couple of things and go, oh great, I want to be a photographer, they do a course, now they're a photographer. Now, okay, the entry sort of tools to photography is probably a little bit easier or much easier than it was in your day when you started. But I think there is no substitute for the desire and hard work to get where you are now. I mean, I know, as I said in the beginning, I know you, and I know the people that you do photography for. I mean, the wine industry. I know you do portrait photography. I know you did cookbooks. I mean, there's many people, and bless their souls, that does wedding photography, and I know you do that too. But yeah, there's a big difference between somebody who takes a camera and take a couple of shots of a wedding and somebody who's a professional photographer.
For sure. Yeah.
And if somebody asks, do you know of a professional photographer? I always say, yes, I do, and I know a very good one. And so, and I think you have such a great eye for, just a picture behind, that's Amsterdam, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I've been to Amsterdam with Jane as well, and just but how, I would get that picture, and where would I have found it? Somewhere on a website, and I had to go and, buy the right to print it out. But you took that picture. That is awesome. And, I could stand on that bridge and take that picture, and I promise you it won't look like that, even if I do it with your camera, and your portrait photography, your wine, your food. Maybe I should ask, what do you like most? I'm sure you like a paying client most, but after that,
It's so difficult. I think with shooting commercially sort of skews your maybe what you prefer doing, because when it's commercially, you start looking, okay, how much this take in terms of time and investment and what I get out. So there is there's a margin of that as well. From a purely enjoyment thing, shooting my own experiences of a town, doing street photography for lack of a better word, like the guys like Henri Cartier-Bresson did in the Magnum Photos era, post-war, those type of things. Obviously that's fun, but with wine, it's fun. It's a very technical pursuit, but I like shooting bottles, and not even the creative stuff, even the straight up catalog stuff. It's actually enjoyable but it's a bit more engineering and problem solving than it is necessarily creative. Problem solving is, I suppose, creative as well. I do enjoy people. But again, it's all these things come with disclaimers. There's a shoot where you photograph somebody on very specifically what their requirements are, and they have a particular, and that's fine, and you become basically the camera operator and the technical guy. So that's one type of thing, and I don't mind that. Much of my work is like that. But then there's portraiture where you get to And I suppose this is the romantic view of portraiture that people normally think it's where you get to kind of discover the person, and that is really fun, and shooting, especially if I can do black and white studies of people, that's where you sit and talk like we are now, and while we're talking, I'm shooting, Generally, I find those to be very enjoyable. But I mean, like I said, I enjoy the act of framing, and so whether it is a landscape and I mean, I enjoy landscapes and stuff as well. I enjoy a lot of different things. I think over the years, I've come to realize it's got more to do, I suppose, with the action than necessarily the topic, But I mean, the subject does play a role. I mean, I like music, so guess what? If I'm going to be shooting musicians, I'm probably going to get a big amount of joy out of it as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's like any sort of job, and maybe for young people who's looking at this video, when you go for your job, what you did in the book that the school gave you, maybe now it's online and you do job studying, whatever. But you see literally this much, and it's normally the glory side, So, I mean, even as a coach, there's certain parts of coaching, even if I'm good at it, it's not necessarily my preference,
Yeah.
So and people have to understand that it's not that you don't like to do the work, because that's your profession, So
Yeah.
part of the coaching, training coaches, training leaders and coaches, I'm good at it, I do it. But if you ask me, what do I love actually most, is actually talk to people one-on-one, which in my horror would be called life coaching, and because unfortunately it became such a bad, name. It's like, and I love my hairdresser, and she's great, and she probably could be a good life coach too. But everybody who's now a hairdresser, or that's brilliant at hairdressing, now somebody says, "Oh, you're good with people," or manager that was a manager at a corporation. "Oh yeah, you were at HR, whatever. You should be a coach, or you should be a life coach,
Yeah.
But to be honest, and not even just in business, I talk now that I'm older, I suppose you get to the point where you can choose a little bit more. But in the corporate space, that's probably the coaching I do now. But next month, 52, so I suppose people actually, there's a little bit, that people take confidence in sharing their life with executives.
Yes.
Because it gets there. But I hear you, Danie. I hope, one day people will pay you millions for the photograph behind you, and you can just walk the streets of Paris and Amsterdam and, wherever you go, take nice photos, and wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think what we're facing now is, I mean, to be paid a large amount of money for that would be awesome. I think just the sheer action of being able to do it is however you fund it is great. I think now in the modern age of the law of diminishing returns, it's like the amount of images that get put into the world are in the billions each day. So I think the imagery will be devalued, especially this type of thing, to a large extent, because there'll just be more and more and more vying for the same buyers. But I think that's what the beauty is. It kind of forces you to go back, and when you take pictures like that, is not to think about it commercially, but to think, what does this do for me? Does it make me happy to take this? I'm a stock photographer as well, so and often I would find myself, when I should be taking pictures that make me happy, I'm thinking, how will this do on a stock site? And I think in the modern, with it being so devalued, I mean, my first big stock image sale, the image sold for 18,000 Rand. I got 9,000 Rand for that. Currently, I get 10 cents for an image. That's how it's been devalued. So the first sale was
guy with the fly fishing rod. That image.
Yeah, no, I could have almost. let me put it to you this way: the image that sold for that much money wasn't much better than that image of the guy with the fly fishing.
It's me with the fly fishing rod.
Yes, but by that time though, when I took the picture of you with the fly fishing rods, that image had already been sold.
But I think, Danie, and we're probably gotta close here, but what me, I mean, we are friends, but what me as somebody who pay for your service enjoyed, and I'm sure if I would go around and ask your clients too, yes, you're a brilliant photographer, but the experience that the client have, I don't know if that's correct grammar, with you, I think that's priceless too. And I mean, I know, you've done a lot of our videos for the company, you've done for a lot of my clients, you've also done the photos, but I mean, you have done pictures from David Kramer right through to Robert Walton and everybody else, and some people don't know, politicians, musicians, actors, famous people. But I think it's the human connection that you as a photographer have with your clients, and I think you can't pay enough for that. And I think I'm sure all those people will say exactly that. And I think that's what I've always enjoyed, not just your art, just the connection with you as a human being.
Well, thank you. I think that helps a lot as well. Like I said, it's to me that means, I think as you grow older, that means more as well, because it indicates meaning versus just accomplishments, So I appreciate that, and I think it's what I try and do. But there's Alfred Eisenstadt was a famous photographer from the early 20th century, and he said it's more important to click with a person than it is to click the shutter.
Awesome. But Danie, thank you so much chatting with you. I really enjoy it, and I wish you all the best. And as always, I will keep sending them to you.